Okay, let's jump right into this. Even 2.5 millennia later, there is literally still one name that perfectly defines power, ambition, and absolute conquest: Alexander the Great. In this explainer, we're going to trace the incredible rise and fall of a king who completely redrew the map of the world, all before he even turned 33.
And I mean, to really wrap your head around the breathtaking scale of what he pulled off, you have to remember the era we're talking about here. There were no satellites, zero GPS, no modern maps, and sending a simple message could take literally months. Yet somehow, Alexander conquered a stretch of land from Greece all the way to Egypt, Persia, and even India. The logistics of that are just staggering.
So that brings us to the big question of today's explainer. Was he actually truly great? Was he this visionary military genius who changed the course of history? Or was he just a ruthless young conqueror who won the world, but ultimately couldn't conquer himself? Keep that in the back of your mind as we go.
Section 1. Forged for Conquest. Alexander was born in 356 BC in Macedon to King Philip II and Queen Olympias. And from day one, he wasn't just taught to rule, he was trained to completely dominate. His early teachers put him through brutal military drills. We're talking combat tactics, intense horse riding, but everything shifted when a new tutor entered his life. And not just any tutor, Aristotle. Yes, that Aristotle. Under his guidance, Alexander studied politics, logic, science, warfare, and leadership. It was this intense mix of philosophy and hardcore warfare that molded him into a fearless prince who honestly believed he was destined to rule the entire world.
Actually, there's this one childhood story about him that's pretty much legendary. At just 10 years old, Alexander managed to tame a wild, massive horse named Bucephalus, a horse literally no one else could handle. That same horse ended up carrying him through some of history's most famous battles. Seeing this, his dad, King Philip, supposedly told him, "My son, seek a kingdom worthy of yourself. Macedon is too small for you." And well, Alexander definitely took that to heart.
Securing the throne. Because having ambition is one thing, right? Actually grabbing and holding on to absolute power is a whole different ballgame.
His rise was staggeringly fast. At 16, while his dad was away fighting, Alexander crushed a local rebellion, proving he could lead an army totally solo. But then, at age 20, his world turned upside down. King Philip was suddenly assassinated at a royal wedding. Boom! Just like that, young Alexander was crowned King of Macedon.
Now, sudden power always comes with enemies. To lock down his throne, Alexander didn't just ask nicely for loyalty. He got ruthless. He brutally eliminated his rivals, crushed Greek rebellions without a second thought, and straight up destroyed entire cities just to send a message. He wanted to make absolutely sure no one would ever question his authority.
Once things were locked down at home, it was time for the Persian campaigns, setting his sights on his biggest goal yet: taking down the terrifying Persian Empire in 334 BC.
The audacity of this move is just wild. On one side, you have Alexander crossing into Asia with a much smaller army, relying purely on speed, super aggressive tactics, and a fearless strategy. And on the other side, King Darius III of Persia. He had massive numbers, heavily fortified positions, and an incredibly formidable cavalry. It was basically the ultimate David versus Goliath story of the ancient world.
But here's the crazy part. Battle after battle, Alexander just shocked the world. He defeated Persian generals at Granicus using sheer aggression. He broke through massive city walls at Halicarnassus. And then, at the famous Battle of Issus, he faced King Darius himself. Despite being hugely outnumbered, Alexander moved with such speed and tactical brilliance that he literally forced Darius to flee the battlefield in terror. After that, he was unstoppable. Kingdoms just started surrendering without a fight.
But if you really want to understand how terrifyingly determined this guy was, let's talk about the Siege of Tyre in 332 BC. Tyre was this island fortress widely considered totally impossible to conquer. So what does Alexander do? He lays siege, and then spends 7 brutal months forcing his army to build a massive stone pathway, like a literal bridge of land, right through the sea itself, just to reach the walls. When he finally broke through, he crushed the city, and thousands were killed. The entire world watched this engineering miracle in absolute horror.
His momentum was like a runaway train. Shortly after Tyre, he rolls into Egypt, but instead of fighting him, they welcome him as a liberator. They even declared him a living god. While he was there, he founded Alexandria, a city that would go on to become one of the greatest centers of human knowledge and trade in all of history. But his biggest test was still waiting. In 331 BC, we get the final showdown, the Battle of Gaugamela. Darius brought an enormous army this time, complete with war chariots and actual elephants. Yet once again, Alexander's battlefield genius completely shattered the Persian forces. The great cities of Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis all fell. Just like that, the richest empire on earth belonged to a guy still in his 20s.
The edge of the world. You see, for Alexander, conquest was a bottomless hunger. Taking Persia just wasn't enough. He pushed his army deeper and deeper into uncharted parts of Asia, hunting down enemies and expanding his borders further than anyone before him, until eventually he turned his sights toward India.
Now, a lot of Indian kingdoms surrendered immediately, but one leader stood his ground, King Porus of Punjab. The Battle of the Hydaspes River was easily one of the most brutal clashes of Alexander's entire life. But here's a really fascinating twist. Even after Alexander won, he was so deeply impressed by Porus's sheer courage and military skill that he actually let the guy keep his throne to continue ruling under his empire. By this point, Alexander had conquered more territory than almost any human in history. But he finally hit a wall he couldn't break down: his own men. After years of endless marching and bloodshed, his soldiers reached their absolute limit. They mutinied. They flat out refused to march one single step farther into India. And so, for the very first time in his life, the unstoppable king was forced to turn back. The sudden fall. As he heads back to Babylon, Alexander starts adopting Persian customs, organizing these massive royal marriages, and, true to his nature, immediately starts planning even bigger military conquests, specifically looking at Arabia. But fate had other plans. In June of 323 BC, after a few days of heavy drinking and intense partying, Alexander's invincible streak hit a dead end. He was suddenly struck by a mysterious, incredibly severe illness. For nearly 2 agonizing weeks, the whole world basically held its breath as his condition rapidly deteriorated. And then, he was gone, at just 32 years old. I mean, think about that. It is absolutely staggering to conquer the known world and die at the height of absolute power at 32. And honestly, his death still sparks intense debate today. Did he die from a natural disease like malaria? Or, considering the trail of enemies he left behind, was he poisoned by his own generals? What we do know for sure is what happened next. Without his iron grip, his massive, newly built empire almost instantly collapsed into chaos and civil war. But the legend of Alexander, that was born forever. For centuries, emperors and warriors traveled to honor him. Yet, kind of hauntingly, the exact location of his tomb remains completely lost today, one of history's most enduring mysteries. Which brings us right back to the question we started this explainer with. Was Alexander the Great a visionary military genius who connected the known world, or was he just a ruthless, blood-soaked conqueror totally consumed by endless ambition? Maybe to truly change the world, you have to be a little bit of both. What do you think true greatness actually means? Let that sink in. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.